Well, hello there, stranger. Whew, you're a real bright and shiny one, aren't you?
Before Your Eyes is a game where your blinking dictates the time spent in the scenes of the game. You start to feel time is fleeting as you see a life pass right by, and as you progress in the story, what time you do have feels like it is never enough. Games as a medium have been evolving for years to cater to the player an experience they would never have had before. Ideas like the ones in Before Your Eyes allow for a connection between the player and the world that they consciously or subconsciously choose to immerse themselves in. Anything from a walking simulator to a massive RPG allows for some form of connection to grow, and that connection in itself allows for the human mind to be altered in some way by the video game and its story.
I'm gonna be a little sick for a while, but really, I don't want you worrying about it at all. You're at such an important moment. Oh, Benny, I told you not to pick up. There's nothing you can do for me right now. All you can do is just keep painting, keep striving. You make that work of true genius. I can just tell you're almost there. So, I'm going to hang up the phone now, and you're just going to get back to work, okay? Goodbye, Benny.
I've been playing video games all my life, and when I think of these ideas in video games today, my mind jumps to Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. It's a game that takes the fundamentals of other video games and experiments with them in a way that brings a fresh take to the table, in terms of connection and immersion, that pulls the player deeper into the world they're interacting with. So how does Hellblade accomplish this? How does Hellblade give the player the chance to empathize and connect with experiences that they wouldn't normally have? And how does it compare or stand out from other games in the medium? In 2013, the studio Naughty Dog released the epitome of narrative-driven video games at the time, one that changed how studios and gamers viewed narratives in video games. This was The Last of Us. When it came out, it completely altered the storytelling practices in the industry. It proved to the mainstream audience that games can tell compelling narratives. What Naughty Dog did differently was dive headfirst into cinematic storytelling and wanted to tell a deeply profound tale, one that most gamers hadn't seen till now, or at least not in this form. They focused on long in-game cutscenes and almost felt as though you were watching a movie instead of playing a game, and in-world storytelling that the player was able to see and interact with on their own. They also brought in the veteran voice actors to physically play the characters of the game through motion capture, which gave them another edge on realism, giving the character models more human features and facial expressions. To the average non-gamer, you would think these things don't seem that important. I mean, it's just a game. But these additions gave the player the ability to see these pixels as real people, ones that were going through unspeakable events, ones that could bring tears to the player's eyes. You felt for these people. You held the remote feeling that you held their lives in your hands. Todd Martins, from the Los Angeles Times, spoke on the game stating, "The Last of Us always felt like a mission statement, a game that wanted to prove that big-budget action shooters could not only have a sense of gravitas, but could advance the medium in narrative, gameplay, and representation." He later quotes Jennifer DeWinter, a game scholar, author, and dean at the Illinois Institute of Technology, on how The Last of Us shifted the idea of what a AAA action game can be when it comes to hardcore players and the genre. Years later, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice takes a stab at this and decides to tell a visually cinematic story that feels chaotic, messy, and emotionally resonant. Just to bring you up to speed, you follow Senua as she arrives at the secret entrance to Helheim in a quest to save the soul of her dead lover Dylan from the goddess Hela. Senua believes she suffers from a curse that causes her to hear the voices of spirits, referred to as Furies in the game, in her head, the most notable of which is the narrator, who is, in a way, an omnipotent voice. Taking inspiration from The Last of Us, new form storytelling is key to giving this game the proper expression and immersion that it wants to portray. It works to make Senua feel relatable and understandable in her need to bring her lover back from the dead, and you are on this journey with her as she fights her way into hell to bring him back. Something that helps us connect visually with Senua in this story, and was used by Naughty Dog in their title, is motion capture. It's a no-brainer for most modern games when trying to tell a deep visual narrative story, and lends itself perfectly to player-led movements and cutscenes in Hellblade. This form of movement for character models allows for real actors to play out the actions in the game. This is everything from idle animations to dynamic cutscenes. Without this, we wouldn't have the detailed and human expressions Senua has to make for us to feel she is real, to make us form a bond with her as the story goes. These details, just like in The Last of Us, allow the player to see these characters as real people. We're not only connected to Senua through mechanics in the game, but we are also holding her life in our hands. But what is it about the game that makes the player feel as though they are in that world? Well, the world Obsidian crafted in Fallout New Vegas expertly combines elements that Jamie Madigan in their paper referred to as rich mental models of the game environment and elements that create consistency between the things in that environment. Multiple sensory channels are exactly what they sound like, channels for your senses. But not only do they have the visual elements of the Mojave Desert to look at, it also brings you there with the sound of the land. Hear your footsteps as you trek from place to place. The sights and sounds of bandits and mutated monsters fill the air. One specific aspect of the game that adds even more is the Pip-Boy you use throughout the game. The device comes with a radio. This works as any normal radio and gives you access to multiple channels to listen to as you make your way through the wasteland, blasting classics like Big Iron by Marty Robbins, 1959.
Big iron on his head. It was early in the morning.
And Heartaches by the Number by Guy Mitchell in 1980. Next, the completeness of these senses is important. With a world as vast and deeply built as New Vegas, the environment plays very well to this. The wasteland is filled with NPCs and enemies to run into. When you wander the sands, there's always a chance to get caught off guard by a Deathclaw or a member of Caesar's Legion. When you do fight them off, you tend to find small protected settlements in groups or large exciting cities. In them, you can find and interact with all sorts of wacky NPCs with deep dialogue and narrative for you to discover. Anywhere you go in the Mojave Desert, you will find that the world is lived in and feels like a real wasteland. However, without a strong and interesting plot to tie this up in a nice bow, it would all fall apart. Good stories are required to immerse the player, and New Vegas has them tenfold. It has long branching paths for you to follow that lead to even more of the wasteland, and it has fun side quests to break up the pacing a little too. Finally, is the demanding mental focus of the environment. If the game has you focused on what's going on in the world, then it will tie up mental resources. This is good for immersion and especially for the traits related to consistency. New Vegas is an older game, so it will come with some issues or limitations, and like most games, it involves game-like mechanics. A heads-up display can be off-putting and could take you out of the spatial presence, but if the game is tasking you with so much in the world or gives you an in-game explanation, then your brain tends not to notice the idea of a health bar or how you can hold 999 stim packs. Another is the believable behavior of the things in the game. A small amount of suspension of disbelief is needed when playing games, and it typically comes with the territory of gaming. But sometimes you might think, why would this be here? And it can take you out of the experience. This is also an issue with the interactivity of items in the world. Objects in the world must consistently work in a physics-based logic, especially if the game wants you to roleplay as the character you are controlling. Interacting with NPCs and being able to move items gives this impression. There are more ideas and ways to immerse the player. Many games find their own way of doing this, especially when it comes to different genres of games. In Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, the immersion Ninja Theory uses is more of a form of manipulation. They used voices and sounds to control how the player thinks. This was done with you hearing the thoughts of Senua and what the voice in her head was saying to you. They could consist of positive thinking, negative reinforcements, and helpful hints on when to dodge an attack or how to solve a puzzle.
Fear swallows you before you have a chance to make sense of it. and darkness becomes a part of who you are.
As a developer studio, they were adamant on creating a realistic simulation of psychosis, so they went to professionals for advice. Paul Fletcher is a professor at the University of Cambridge. When questioned on the approach from the team, he stated, "Ninja Theory emailed me and said that they were making a game in which the central character had a psychotic mental illness, and would I be interested in giving them some advice on this as a clinician? I was initially a bit skeptical because I hadn't actually heard of Ninja Theory, and I was aware that computer games weren't terribly sensitive in handling mental illness. But I came along, met with the producers, and it was very clear in a short space of time that they were serious about working sensitivity and in an informed way. For a long time, I've thought that computer games have a great deal to offer our understanding of how we process the world, so I was hooked from an early stage." Soundscape and voices weren't all they used to immerse you. To induce a more personal immersion between the player and Senua, Ninja Theory took an approach to gaming that some studios are fearful of. This would be manipulating and lying to the player. When you start the story, it prompts you with a message. This is threatening to the average player. The idea of a permadeath system forces the player to act cautiously when in fights, because one wrong move can kill you, and that brings you a step closer to that game over screen as the rot snakes its way up each death. The truth is, this mechanic isn't real. No matter how many times you die, the rot will never continue. Instead, the progression of the story will move the rot closer. No matter what you do, the rot will reach her head. It's all a part of the story, but as the player, you're left in the dark on this. This mechanic leads well into the story and the connection the player gains from the world. It's an extremely polished game with extremely lit and detailed landscapes too. It drops you in big set piece moments that make you grip the controller, just praying you make it out of this one alive. Fear and hope are prevalent in the story as well as in your heart. Mechanics like these add a level of immersion that, in my opinion, isn't benefited from enough. Just know that spatial presence or immersion is key to integrating the mind and heart of the player into the game. Speaking of heart, have you ever cried? Because video games are very good at that as well. Video games have a special way of pulling at the heartstrings. We as humans tend to relate and form bonds with people, or in this case, characters and stories. As we learn of their happiness and cherished moments, tragedies and woes, we start to see ourselves in them, or they in us. They become real, and we start to feel empathetic towards those in these worlds. Due to the immersion of the medium, these games can tell these massive, interwoven tales of adventure that carry so much weight to them, and ones that are told through the tiniest details, but still grip us. Both can make one feel something inside. In What Remains of Edith Finch, you walk in the shoes of an unnamed character. You arrive at an abandoned house with the journal of Edith Finch in hand, entering the property to uncover the mystery behind a possible curse that killed the family one by one. The story is a narrative-focused walking simulator, and you explore the Finch household and surrounding land through a semi-linear series of rooms. This allows you to unfold some parts of the game in any order. It is up to you. Edith narrates to you through the journal as you learn about the dark past that haunted the Finch family. You and the character learn the tales of the past at the same time, giving you the impression of being there yourself. You learn how each member of the family died, how some turned on each other, and how some went crazy out of the fear of the curse. Walking through the house, you start to find the writings of the other family members, allowing you insight as to their psyche. As expected, this story does not end happily. But through this style of gameplay and storytelling, it gives you hope in some spots, only to crush you with the remembrance of how no one lived. The game could just tell you outright how Calvin falls to his death after swinging off the edge of the cliff. He was only 11. Or how about Walter, who spent 30 years in the bunker of the house out of fear, only to finally decide to leave and is immediately hit by a train upon exiting. You are meant to feel as though you were there with them, as one of the family, only to see each member die to a curse that was never real to begin with. They want you to feel and understand the pain they went through. What Remains of Edith Finch gives you a grounded, empathetic story that makes you feel one with the troubled characters. These emotions we gain from games like What Remains of Edith Finch are special. To be able to make you sympathize and empathize with these fictional worlds is beyond important to the gaming experience as a medium. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice takes an approach that blends empathy and sympathy. You feel confused as to what follows and hurts Senua, but still feel sympathetic to her as well. We learn as the game goes on that Senua is burdened with a form of mental illness. It is not exactly clear at the start what it truly is, but the intention of this story device is the same either way. In an interview with Dominic Matthews about the game, he was asked why and how it created an authentic experience of psychosis for the player. He replies, "We're not trying to provide a blueprint or catch-all of this is what it's like to live with psychosis, but a way of experiencing psychosis that's true to the lived experience." So take the example of hearing voices. Some people will hear voices in the same way you'd hear anyone else's voice, and they can place them in a 3D space around them. We wanted to take that idea and try to bring that concept into the game. So we recorded all of the voices so that when you encountered them in the game, you'd be able to place them in 3D space around you, particularly on headphones. I think that's a good example of the types of things people shared with us, and we said, if the player is going to encounter voices in the game, how can we make that as authentic an experience as possible? Not only are the voices heard in the game meant to be coming from Senua's head, but we as the player are meant to fight through it as well. Not all the voices are evil though. In parts of the game when the voices reach their max, some are heard trying to help Senua and you. With the 3D spatial sound, they warn you of incoming attacks and specific ideas on how to solve a puzzle. But with the good, there's always the bad. Voices will constantly berate you with negative comments telling you how terrible you are or how you aren't strong enough to do the task at hand. You reach segments in the game where they make you feel hopeless, that it's not possible to save him. But again, you get told as well that you have the power to change that. Though through it all, Senua and you continue to fight. You both rise above the voices. The sympathy you had for Senua at the start turns into empathy for her because you too are burdened with her curse. You begin to feel the fear of death just as Senua does. You are haunted by the same voices that followed her all her life. She is not alone in this quest. The torture is shared with you. You know, at the end of this, I had this whole spiel about the medium of video games and how much it had changed to become what it is today. How the influence of this and that, or whatever this is, has forever changed the video game world. But it doesn't feel right though. What I want to say is how important video games and their stories are to me. How I've been emotionally touched and moved by so many different video games over the 15 odd years I've been playing them, and I am constantly blown away at the scale at which they change me and how it could do the same to you if you give it a chance. So, that being said, pick up a game every so often, because you'll never know what they're capable of till you do. And who knows? You might fall in love with them too.